The Galactic Council had existed for over 3,000 years, governing hundreds of species across thousands of worlds. In all that time, they had never encountered a species quite like the humans. When first contact was made with the small blue planet called Earth, the initial reports seemed almost laughable to the council members. The humans were a relatively young species, having only just discovered faster-than-light travel. Their technology was crude compared to the advanced civilizations that dominated the galaxy. They had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum computers. Their ships were built from primitive metals and ran on chemical rockets supplemented by basic fusion drives. By all galactic standards, they should have been classified as a pre-spaceflight civilization, barely worthy of observation protocols. Ambassador Zexhai of the Corvani Empire was the first to make formal contact. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through superior technology and strategic warfare. The Corvani were tall, reptilian beings with natural armor plating and enhanced strength. They viewed themselves as the apex predators of the galaxy, and their military might had never been successfully challenged. When Zexhai's diplomatic vessel approached Earth's primitive space stations, he expected the usual response from inferior species: awe, submission, and immediate requests for technological advancement in exchange for resources and loyalty. Instead, the humans responded with curious enthusiasm and an almost childlike wonder at meeting another intelligent species. The initial meetings took place aboard the human space station designated Unity Station, orbiting their homeworld. Ambassador Zexhai found himself face-to-face with a human delegation led by Dr. Sarah Chun, Earth's first xenobiologist, and Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, representing Earth's United Defense Force. The humans were smaller than most galactic species, standing barely 6 feet tall on average. They had no natural weapons, no armored skin, no enhanced physical abilities. Their eyes were tiny compared to most species, suggesting poor night vision. Their hearing seemed limited to a narrow frequency range. They appear to be one of the most physically disadvantaged species the Corvani had ever encountered. Dr. Chin spoke with genuine excitement about cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and peaceful coexistence. She asked countless questions about Corvani biology, their homeworld, their technology, and their society. Admiral Rodriguez maintained a respectful but cautious demeanor, asking practical questions about galactic law, trade agreements, and defense protocols. What struck Ambassador Zexhai as most peculiar was the humans' approach to conflict resolution. When he mentioned the standard galactic practice of tributary relationships between advanced and primitive species, Dr. Chun politely but firmly explained that humanity valued independence and self-determination above all else. They were willing to trade, learn, and cooperate, but they would never accept subjugation. Admiral Rodriguez added that while humanity preferred peace, they had learned through their own history that sometimes freedom required the willingness to fight for it. This statement puzzled the ambassador. What could these weak creatures possibly do against the advanced military forces of established galactic powers? The meeting concluded with preliminary agreements for scientific and cultural exchange. Ambassador Zexhai left Earth with detailed reports about human capabilities, or rather, their apparent lack thereof. The humans possessed no significant military technology, no advanced defensive systems, and no apparent allies among the galactic community. They seemed like an ideal target for easy conquest and resource extraction. Upon returning to the Corvani homeworld of Kurthak, Ambassador Zexhai presented his findings to the Imperial War Council. The massive chamber was filled with the Empire's greatest military minds, their scaled forms creating an imposing presence under the harsh artificial lighting. General Vortak, the Empire's supreme military commander, listened with growing interest as the ambassador described Earth's vulnerabilities. The humans possessed abundant natural resources, including rare minerals that were essential for advanced technology. Their planet was perfectly positioned along several major trade routes that could provide strategic advantages. Most importantly, their apparent weakness suggested that conquest would be swift and cost-effective. General Vortak stood before the assembled council, his massive form casting long shadows across the chamber. His voice carried the authority of countless successful campaigns. These humans represent an opportunity that cannot be ignored. Their resources would fuel our expansion for generations, and their strategic location would give us unprecedented control over this sector of the galaxy. The council members murmured agreement. The Corvani military machine had grown restless during the recent period of peace. Their warriors needed conquest to maintain their edge, and their economy required constant expansion to support their growing population. A quick victory against a primitive species would serve multiple purposes. However, one voice raised a concern that would later prove prophetic. Elder Tekmor, an ancient Corvani who had witnessed centuries of warfare, stood slowly from his position at the council table. His scarred hide bore testimony to countless battles, and his missing left arm reminded all present that even the mighty Corvani were not invincible. "I urge caution," the elder spoke, his voice carrying across the chamber despite his age. "Throughout our history, we have learned that the most dangerous opponents are often those who appear weakest. These humans have survived on a world that breeds constant conflict among their own kind. They have fought countless wars against each other and emerged stronger each time. Perhaps their lack of advanced technology is not a weakness, but a different kind of strength." General Vortak dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. "You speak of caution born from age, honored elder. But we have observed their capabilities firsthand. Their weapons are primitive projectile throwers. Their ships barely achieve faster-than-light speeds. Their military forces are scattered across multiple competing nations rather than unified under a single command. They pose no threat to our forces." The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The younger, more aggressive members of the council outnumbered the cautious voices. The decision was made to launch a preliminary strike against human colonies to test their defenses and gauge their response. If the initial attack proved successful, a full-scale invasion would follow. Admiral Colvan was assigned to lead the operation. A veteran of dozens of successful campaigns, he had never faced defeat in battle. His fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, each equipped with plasma cannons capable of reducing mountains to ash and shields that could withstand nuclear bombardment. Supporting the cruisers were 40 smaller vessels designed for rapid strikes and orbital bombardment. The target selected was Kepler Station, a small human research outpost in the Proxima Centauri system. Intelligence reports indicated the station housed fewer than 5,000 humans and was protected by only a handful of primitive patrol vessels. It seemed like the perfect target for a demonstration of Corvani superiority. As Admiral Colvan's fleet prepared for departure, he reviewed the tactical assessments one final time. The humans' defensive capabilities were laughably inadequate. Their patrol ships were armed with kinetic weapons that would barely scratch Corvani armor. Their communication systems were slow and inefficient, meaning any call for help would take days to reach Earth. By the time human reinforcements could arrive, Kepler Station would be under complete Corvani control. The Admiral felt confident as his fleet jumped into hyperspace, heading toward what he believed would be an easy victory. None of the Corvani commanders suspected that they were about to make a discovery that would change their understanding of warfare forever. They were about to learn that technological superiority meant nothing when faced with an opponent who refused to accept defeat. The journey to Proxima Centauri took 3 standard days at maximum hyperspace velocity. During the trip, Admiral Colvan briefed his subordinates on the attack plan. The strategy was straightforward. Emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the system, advance on Kepler Station while jamming all communications, destroy any defensive vessels that attempted to intervene, and demand immediate surrender. If the humans complied, they would be taken as prisoners and relocated to serve as workers in Corvani mining colonies. If they resisted, the station would be destroyed as an example to other human settlements. The admiral expected compliance. In his experience, primitive species rarely chose death over slavery when faced with overwhelming force. As the fleet approached the Proxima Centauri system, sensor readings confirmed the intelligence reports. Kepler Station appeared exactly as described. A small research facility orbiting the system's habitable planet, protected by 3 patrol vessels that seemed impossibly tiny compared to Corvani warships. The humans appeared to be conducting some kind of scientific research on the planet below, probably related to their primitive understanding of terraforming technology. Admiral Colvan gave the order to drop out of hyperspace and begin the attack. The Corvani fleet materialized in normal space with a dramatic visual effect that had intimidated countless species throughout their history. 12 massive vessels, each over 2 kilometers in length, appeared as if from nowhere, their weapons systems already charging for battle. The response from Kepler Station was immediate but not what the Admiral expected. Instead of panic or immediate surrender, the humans began broadcasting on all frequencies a simple message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. This is Commander Lisa Park of Kepler Station to any Corvani vessels. You are in violation of interstellar law and are ordered to withdraw immediately. Any hostile action against this facility or its personnel will be considered an act of war against humanity. Admiral Colvan almost laughed at the audacity of the message. This tiny human outpost was threatening his mighty fleet. The 3 human patrol vessels were moving to intercept, their primitive weapons systems powering up. Each patrol ship was roughly the size of a Corvani shuttle, armed with what appeared to be enhanced versions of the kinetic weapons they had observed during first contact. The Admiral opened a communication channel to Kepler Station. I'm Admiral Colvan of the Corvani Imperial Fleet. Your species is now under Corvani protection. Surrender immediately and prepare for evacuation to designated relocation facilities. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Commander Park's response came back immediately, her voice steady and calm despite the impossible odds she faced. Admiral, I'm going to give you one more chance to withdraw. You clearly don't understand what you're starting here. We don't surrender, we don't run, and we definitely don't get relocated anywhere we don't want to go. Last warning. The sheer defiance in the human's voice surprised the Admiral. He had expected fear, pleading, or at least recognition of the hopeless situation. Instead, this human commander was speaking to him as if she held the superior position. It was time to demonstrate the reality of galactic warfare to these primitive creatures. Admiral Colvan ordered his flagship to target the largest human patrol vessel with a low-powered plasma burst, intending to disable rather than destroy. It would serve as a demonstration of Corvani capabilities while leaving survivors to spread word of what happened to those who defied the Empire. The plasma cannon fired, sending a brilliant beam of superheated energy across space toward the human ship. The Corvani crew watched their sensors, expecting to see the immediate destruction of the primitive vessel. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ship didn't just survive the plasma burst. It seemed to absorb and redirect the energy, emerging from the attack completely undamaged. Before Admiral Colvan could process what had occurred, the 3 human patrol vessels opened fire. Their kinetic weapons launched projectiles that moved far faster than Corvani sensors had predicted. The round struck the flagship's shields with devastating impact, causing them to flicker and fail temporarily before regenerating. The Admiral stared at his tactical display in shock. Those primitive kinetic weapons had actually managed to overload his ship's defensive systems, something that hadn't happened in decades of warfare. How is this possible? His tactical officer provided the answer that chilled every Corvani on the bridge. Sir, analysis of human weapons shows they're firing depleted uranium rounds at roughly 15% of light speed. The kinetic energy transfer is equivalent to low-grade antimatter weapons. The humans had turned their apparent technological disadvantage into a strength. While other species focused on energy weapons and exotic technologies, humans had perfected the art of accelerating simple matter to incredible velocities. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, but their effectiveness was undeniable. Commander Park's voice crackled over the communications channel one more time. "Admiral, you just fired on a human installation and attacked human citizens. Congratulations. You're now at war with all of humanity. I hope it was worth it." Admiral Colvan's confidence evaporated as the battle unfolded in ways no Corvani tactical manual had ever described. The three human patrol vessels moved with unpredictable patterns, their pilots demonstrating flying skills that defied conventional military doctrine. Instead of maintaining formation and engaging in traditional fleet combat, each human ship operated independently, making rapid course changes that seemed to anticipate Corvani targeting systems. The Corvani fleet attempted to surround the smaller vessels, using their numerical advantage to create crossfire zones that should have been impossible to escape. However, the humans had apparently studied Corvani tactics extensively during the diplomatic period. They consistently managed to position themselves where only one or two Corvani ships could engage them at a time, while using the cover of asteroid fields and space debris to break targeting locks. What truly shocked the Corvani was the humans' apparent disregard for their own safety. Traditional galactic warfare followed established protocols designed to minimize casualties while achieving military objectives. Species fought until defeat became inevitable, then surrendered to preserve their populations. The humans showed no such rational behavior. When the patrol vessel designated Defender suffered critical damage to its main drive, Admiral Colvan expected immediate surrender. Instead, the ship's captain deliberately piloted his vessel on a collision course with a Corvani cruiser Dominance. The Corvani crew had seconds to realize what was happening before the human ship struck their vessel at nearly 10% of light speed. The impact devastated both vessels. The human patrol ship was completely destroyed, but it took the massive Corvani cruiser with it. Over 3,000 Corvani warriors died in an instant, victims of a tactic that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The admiral stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans had just sacrificed an entire ship and crew to destroy a single enemy vessel, despite being massively outnumbered. The remaining two human patrol vessels continued their desperate fight, but the outcome was inevitable. Within 6 hours, both ships had been destroyed, along with their brave crews. Kepler Station itself fell after a brutal siege that lasted another 4 hours. The research facility's defensive systems had been improvised for mining equipment and scientific instruments, but the humans had fought for every corridor, every laboratory, every storage bay. Admiral Colvan's forces finally secured the station, but at a cost that horrified the Corvani command structure. Over 4,000 Corvani casualties, 2 ships completely destroyed, and 7 others requiring extensive repairs. The humans had inflicted losses on the Corvani fleet that exceeded the combined casualties from their last 10 military campaigns. Worse still, the humans had managed to transmit detailed tactical data to Earth before the station fell. Every Corvani weapon signature, ship design, and battle tactic had been recorded and broadcast across human communication networks. The element of surprise was completely lost. As Admiral Colvan surveyed the wreckage of what should have been a simple demonstration of power, he received reports that chilled him to his scaled core. The surviving humans had not begged for mercy or attempted to negotiate. Even under torture, they provided only name, rank, and a serial number system. When questioned about human military capabilities, they all gave the same response: "You'll find out soon enough." The Admiral sent his report to the Corvani High Command, detailing the unexpected resistance and heavy casualties. He recommended immediate withdrawal from human space and re-evaluation of invasion plans. However, General Vortak interpreted the report differently. The humans had proven more dangerous than anticipated, but they had ultimately been defeated. The general saw this as confirmation that overwhelming force could still achieve victory. The destruction of Kepler Station sent shockwaves throughout human space. Within hours of receiving the tactical data, every human colony, mining station, and exploration vessel had been placed on maximum alert. Earth's United Defense Force mobilized with a speed that surprised even their own commanders. The attack had unified humanity in a way that decades of diplomatic negotiations had failed to achieve. Admiral Rodriguez stood before the United Nations Security Council, his expression grim as he briefed world leaders on the situation. The holographic display showed the last known positions of human vessels throughout colonized space, each one now potentially under threat from Corvani attack. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the weight of recent tragedy. "We are now at war with a technologically superior alien empire. Kepler Station's sacrifice brought us invaluable intelligence about enemy capabilities, but we face odds that would seem insurmountable to any rational military analysis." The representative from the African Union leaned forward her chair. "Admiral, what are our realistic chances of survival if the Corvani launch a full-scale invasion?" Rodriguez paused before answering, choosing his words carefully. "In a conventional military engagement using current technology, our survival probability approaches zero. Corvani ships are faster, better armed, and better defended than anything in our fleet. However, conventional engagement is not humanity's only option." Dr. Chun, now serving as the Secretary General's advisor on xenological affairs, activated a secondary display showing detailed analysis of the Kepler Station battle. "The tactical data we received reveals several critical weaknesses in Corvani military doctrine. They fight like apex predators, relying on superior technology and overwhelming force to achieve quick victories. They're unprepared for opponents who refuse to surrender and who are willing to sacrifice everything for even small tactical advantages." The Brazilian representative raised his hand. "Are you suggesting we can actually defeat them militarily?" "Not in open battle," Rodriguez admitted. "But we don't have to defeat them militarily. We just have to make conquest so costly that they abandon the attempt. The Corvani Empire controls hundreds of worlds and faces numerous potential threats. They cannot afford to tie up their entire military fighting a species that refuses to be conquered." The meeting continued for 12 hours as human leadership developed what would later be known as the Terran Doctrine. Unable to match alien technology, humanity would leverage its greatest advantages: adaptability, determination, and an apparent willingness to accept casualties that other species would consider insane. Within 48 hours of Kepler Station's fall, human engineering teams across the galaxy had begun implementing radical modifications to their vessels and installations. If they could not prevent Corvani attacks, they would ensure that every human facility became a death trap for any alien forces foolish enough to board them. The human colony ship New Horizon, carrying 15,000 colonists to the Gliese system, received word of the Corvani attack while still in hyperspace. Captain Elena Vasquez faced an impossible decision. She could continue to her destination and hope the Corvani hadn't learned of the colony ship's existence, or she could alter course and attempt to reach the safety of more heavily defended human space. Vasquez chose a third option that would have been incomprehensible to most galactic species. She altered course toward the Corvani supply lines that intelligence suggested ran through the nearby Vega system. If the Corvani wanted a war, humanity would give them one, but on human terms. The New Horizon had been designed as a peaceful colony vessel, equipped with industrial fabricators, mining equipment, and agricultural systems intended to establish human civilization on distant worlds. Captain Vasquez and her crew spent the next 3 days converting their ship into something entirely different. Industrial fabricators that should have produced farming equipment instead churned out weapons and armor. Mining charges intended for asteroid processing were reconfigured as improvised explosives. Most dramatically, The ship's massive fusion drives were modified to function as a weapon system capable of producing a directed energy beam that could rival military-grade plasma cannons. When the New Horizon dropped out of hyperspace in the Vega system, Corvani sensors initially classified it as a standard human civilian vessel. The ship's massive size and obvious civilian design made it appear to be fleeing rather than approaching for battle. Admiral Kethvar, commanding the Corvani supply fleet, ordered his ships to intercept and capture what appeared to be valuable prisoners and technology. The Corvani approach followed standard protocols for dealing with civilian vessels. A single cruiser moved to intercept, while the remainder of the supply fleet continued its operations. Admiral Kethvar intended to demonstrate Corvani mercy by accepting the humans' inevitable surrender without unnecessary bloodshed. Captain Vasquez waited until the Corvani cruiser was within optimal range before revealing her ship's true nature. The New Horizon's modified fusion drives suddenly rotated on improvised mounting systems, targeting the approaching alien vessel. At the same moment, hundreds of hidden weapon ports opened along the colony's ship's hull, revealing the arsenal that 15,000 desperate humans had created in just 3 days. The modified fusion drive fired first, sending a coherent beam of superheated plasma across space at nearly light speed. The Corvani cruiser's shields, designed to deflect standard energy weapons, proved completely inadequate against what was essentially a directed stellar flare. The alien ship's defensive systems failed catastrophically, leaving its hull exposed to the secondary bombardment. Thousands of improvised missiles, each one a mining charge with basic guidance systems, struck the Corvani vessel simultaneously. The explosions tore through the alien ship's armor plating, venting atmosphere and crew into space. Within minutes, the mighty Corvani cruiser had been reduced to an expanding cloud of debris. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as a civilian colony ship had just destroyed one of his most powerful vessels using improvised weapons that shouldn't have existed. Before he could formulate a response, the New Horizon did something even more shocking. It began broadcasting on all frequencies, transmitting detailed technical specifications for every weapon modification the colonists had created. Captain Vasquez's voice carried across Corvani communication systems with deadly calm. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of a human colony ship, New Horizon, to all Corvani forces. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when you threaten our families? This is just the beginning. We're transmitting the technical data for every modification we've made to this vessel. Every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy now has access to these designs. We're not just going to fight you. We're going to teach every human in space how to turn anything into a weapon. The Admiral realized with growing dread that the humans had just demonstrated something far worse than superior technology. They had shown the ability to innovate under pressure, to transform civilian resources into military capabilities, and to share that knowledge instantly across their entire species. Every human vessel in space had just become a potential warship. As if to emphasize the point, the New Horizon began its attack run on the Corvani supply depot. The massive colony ship, never designed for combat maneuvers, moved with surprising agility as Captain Vasquez demonstrated flying skills learned in Earth's asteroid mining operations. The ship twisted and rolled through three-dimensional space, avoiding return fire while closing on its target. The Corvani supply depot was heavily defended by automated systems and a garrison of warriors, but it had been designed to repel conventional military attacks. The base's defensive grid fired volleys of plasma bolts at the approaching colony ship, but the New Horizon's improvised armor held against the bombardment. Captain Vasquez brought her ship to within a few kilometers of the depot before implementing the final phase of her plan. The New Horizon launched its entire complement of escape pods, each one modified to carry colonists armed with improvised weapons and explosives. 15,000 humans, ranging from children to elderly colonists, descended on the Corvani facility like a swarm of vengeful angels. The Corvani garrison had never faced anything like the human assault. These were not trained soldiers following military doctrine. They were ordinary people fighting for their species' survival. They used tactics that no military academy taught, exploiting weaknesses in Corvani psychology and physiology that formal intelligence had never identified. Human children, small enough to crawl through ventilation systems, planted explosives in critical infrastructure. Elderly colonists, considered non-combatants by Corvani standards, revealed a lifetime of accumulated knowledge about engineering and improvised weapons. Civilian scientists demonstrated an understanding of Corvani biology that allowed them to create chemical weapons from common industrial supplies. The battle for the supply depot lasted only 6 hours, but the psychological impact would resonate throughout the Corvani Empire for generations. A civilian human colony ship had not only destroyed a military cruiser and captured a major supply base, it had done so using improvised weapons and untrained personnel who should have posed no threat to professional warriors. Admiral Kethvar managed to escape with a handful of surviving ships, but his report to Corvani High Command painted a picture of human warfare that challenged every assumption about civilized conflict. The humans didn't just refuse to surrender. They seemed incapable of recognizing when defeat was inevitable. Worse still, they appeared to view civilian populations as legitimate military assets, transforming ordinary people into combatants with terrifying effectiveness. General Vortak read the Admiral's report with growing unease. The Corvani had expected to face a primitive but determined military force. Instead, they were fighting an entire species that had apparently decided that anything and everything could be weaponized if necessary. The implications were staggering. As news of the Vega system victory spread throughout human space, colonies and installations that had been preparing for desperate last stands suddenly found new hope. If a colony ship could defeat Corvani forces, then perhaps humanity's chances weren't as hopeless as they had seemed. More importantly, the technical data broadcast by the New Horizon provided every human settlement with the knowledge needed to transform themselves into armed fortresses. The war that the Corvani had expected to end quickly was just beginning, and humanity was proving to be unlike any opponent they had ever faced. The war between humanity and the Corvani Empire had been raging for 8 months when the aliens made their greatest tactical error. General Vortak, frustrated by the humans' refusal to fight conventional battles, decided to force them into open combat by targeting Earth itself. The Corvani assembled the largest fleet in their empire's history, over 300 vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers, carrying more than 2 million warriors. The journey to Earth would take 6 weeks at maximum hyperspace velocity, giving the humans time to prepare their defenses. However, intelligence reports suggested that Earth's protective fleet consisted of fewer than 50 vessels, most of them converted civilian ships using the improvised weapon systems that had proven effective in smaller engagements. General Vortak was confident that overwhelming numbers would finally break human resistance. What the Corvani commander didn't understand was that in those 8 months of warfare, humanity had undergone a transformation that went far beyond military adaptation. The species that had once been divided into competing nations and conflicting ideologies had united under a single, terrifying purpose: the complete destruction of any force that threatened their existence. Dr. Sarah Chun, now serving as Earth's Director of Xenological Warfare, stood before the Global Defense Council in Geneva. The assembled leaders represented every human nation, colony, and military organization. Behind her, holographic displays showed the approaching Corvani fleet, its massive size dwarfing anything humanity had faced before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Chen began, her voice calm despite the magnitude of the threat. "We have approximately 42 days before the Corvani fleet reaches Earth. Our conventional defenses, even with the modifications we've implemented, cannot withstand an assault of this magnitude. However, conventional defense is not what we're planning. Admiral Rodriguez activated a secondary display showing detailed schematics of Earth's solar system. Red markers indicated the positions of human defensive installations, while blue lines showed projected Corvani approach vectors. We've spent the last 8 months learning everything possible about Corvani psychology, physiology, and military doctrine. They are apex predators who have never faced an opponent willing to match their brutality. That's about to change. The plan that Earth's leadership had developed was so radical that it violated every principle of civilized warfare. Rather than attempting to defend Earth directly, humanity would turn the entire solar system into a weapon designed to destroy not just the Corvani fleet, but the Empire's will to continue fighting. Operation Nemesis began with what appeared to be a human evacuation. Civilian ships by the thousands launched from Earth, Mars, and the lunar colonies heading toward the outer system. Corvani long-range sensors detected the massive exodus and interpreted it as confirmation that the humans were finally accepting the inevitability of defeat. General Vortak ordered his fleet to accelerate, hoping to catch the fleeing vessels before they could escape to other star systems. The first phase of the human trap was triggered when the Corvani fleet crossed the orbit of Pluto. What the aliens thought were fleeing civilian vessels suddenly revealed their true nature. Each ship had been converted into a massive kinetic weapon, their cargo holds filled with dense metals and nuclear explosives. Instead of running away, they turned toward the approaching Corvani fleet and accelerated to ramming speed. The Corvani found themselves facing thousands of kamikaze ships, each one piloted by volunteers who had accepted that their survival was less important than humanity's future. The alien fleet's defensive systems were overwhelmed by the sheer number of targets. Plasma cannons and missile batteries fired continuously, destroying dozens of human ships, but for every vessel they stopped, 5 more broke through their defensive screen. General Vortak watched in horror as hundreds of his ships were destroyed by collisions with what should have been harmless civilian craft. The humans were deliberately sacrificing their own people in numbers that defied rational understanding. Even more disturbing, intercepted communications revealed that the human pilots were volunteering for these suicide missions faster than ships could be prepared for them. The second phase began as the battered Corvani fleet approached the orbit of Jupiter. The massive gas giant had been surrounded by a network of industrial platforms that appeared to be mining operations. As the alien fleet drew closer, these platforms revealed their true purpose. Using Jupiter's gravitational field as a focusing mechanism, the humans had created a series of mass drivers capable of accelerating metallic projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been converted into ammunition for these massive weapons. Chunks of rock and metal, some as large as city blocks, began hurtling toward the Corvani fleet with devastating accuracy. The aliens' energy shields, designed to deflect plasma bolts and particle beams, proved useless against projectiles carrying the kinetic energy equivalent of nuclear weapons. Admiral Colvan, commanding one of the fleet's dreadnoughts, found himself fighting a battle unlike anything in Corvani military history. The humans weren't just using unconventional weapons. They had turned the solar system itself into a weapon. Every planet, moon, and asteroid had been militarized in ways that violated every assumption about the limits of defensive warfare. The third phase activated as the fleet approached Mars. The red planet's surface erupted with thousands of launch sites, sending waves of nuclear-armed missiles toward the alien invaders. But these weren't ordinary nuclear weapons. Human scientists had spent months studying captured Corvani technology, learning how to modify their warheads to specifically target alien shield frequencies and hull materials. More terrifyingly, the missiles were guided by artificial intelligence systems that the humans had somehow taught to think like Corvani tactical officers. The weapons anticipated evasive maneuvers, predicted targeting solutions, and coordinated their attacks in ways that maximized damage against alien defensive systems. It was as if the humans had created electronic versions of Corvani military mines specifically to destroy Corvani ships. General Vortak's fleet, which had numbered over 300 vessels at the start of the solar system assault, had been reduced to fewer than 90 ships by the time they reached Earth's orbital space. The survivors were damaged, demoralized, and facing an enemy that seemed willing to sacrifice everything for even small tactical advantages. The final phase of Operation Nemesis began as the Corvani fleet entered Earth's immediate vicinity. The planet's moon had been converted into a massive weapons platform, its surface bristling with railguns, missile batteries, and energy weapons reverse-engineered from captured alien technology. But the moon's true purpose was revealed when it suddenly began moving out of its natural orbit. Human engineers had installed massive fusion drives across the lunar surface, turning Earth's satellite into a kinetic weapon of unprecedented scale. The moon accelerated slowly at first, then, with increasing speed as its improvised propulsion systems reached full power. General Vortak realized with growing horror that the humans intended to use their own moon as a projectile weapon. The Corvani fleet scattered, attempting to avoid the approaching celestial body, but the humans had anticipated this response. Hidden throughout Earth's orbital space were thousands of smaller weapons platforms, each one designed to herd the alien ships toward predetermined kill zones. The surviving Corvani vessels found themselves trapped between the approaching moon and a network of defensive positions that made escape impossible. Admiral Rodriguez broadcast a message to the Corvani fleet from Earth's surface, his words carrying across every alien communication frequency. General Vortak, this is Admiral Marcus Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. You came here to destroy our homeworld and exterminate our species. Instead, you've learned what happens when you threaten everything a human holds dear. Your fleet is broken, your warriors are dead, and your empire is about to learn why attacking humanity was the greatest mistake in galactic history. The general opened a communication channel to Earth's surface, his voice carrying the strain of witnessing the destruction of the mightiest fleet in Corvani history. Admiral Rodriguez, I formally request terms of surrender. My remaining forces will withdraw from human space, and Rodriguez's response cut through the general's words like a blade. General, you seem to misunderstand the situation. We're not accepting your surrender. We're not negotiating terms. You attacked our people, destroyed our colonies, and killed our families. There are no terms except your complete destruction. The horror in General Vortak's voice was unmistakable. But the laws of civilized warfare demand we never agreed to fight a civilized war, Rodriguez replied coldly. You started this conflict by attacking defenseless researchers. You continued it by targeting civilian colonies. You came to our homeworld intending genocide. We're simply finishing what you began, but we're going to finish it properly. The remaining Corvani ships attempted to fight their way out of the trap, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and facing opponents who had spent 8 months learning how to kill their kind. Human weapons, initially primitive by galactic standards, had been refined through constant combat into instruments specifically designed to destroy Corvani vessels. More importantly, the humans themselves had changed. The species that had once debated the ethics of warfare now fought with a cold efficiency that terrified their alien opponents. Every human soldier, pilot, and engineer had lost friends or family members to Corvani attacks. This wasn't just a military conflict. It was a species-wide vendetta. The battle for Earth's orbital space lasted 18 hours. When it ended, no Corvani vessel remained operational. Some ships had been destroyed by weapons fire, others by kinetic impacts, and several had been deliberately rammed by human crews who chose death over allowing a single alien to escape. General Vortak himself died when his flagship was struck by a modified asteroid that human engineers had been preparing for months specifically for his vessel. As the wreckage of the Corvani fleet drifted through space, Earth's communications networks came alive with reports from human colonies throughout the galaxy. The destruction of the Empire's main fleet had triggered uprisings on every world where humans had been taken as prisoners. Mining colonies that had been established using human slave labor suddenly found our workforce had transformed into guerrilla armies. Dr. Chun stood in the ruins of what had been the Corvani command ship, surveying the technology that would soon be reverse-engineered and incorporated into human vessels. Around her, human engineers were already cataloging alien equipment and planning how it could be adapted for humanity's purposes. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted permanently. The Corvani Empire, which had ruled hundreds of worlds for thousands of years, now faced an opponent that seemed to view total warfare as an acceptable solution to diplomatic problems. More disturbing still, the humans appear to be enjoying their transition from peaceful explorers to galactic predators. Admiral Rodriguez received reports from deep space scouts indicating that human fleets were already moving toward Corvani colonial worlds. Ships that had been converted from civilian vessels were carrying human soldiers trained in the specific techniques needed to fight Corvani warriors on their own territory. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was proving to be remarkably good at the role reversal. The aliens who had once considered humans to be primitive creatures suitable only for slavery were about to learn that they had awakened something far worse than another military opponent. They had created an enemy that viewed the complete destruction of their civilization as a reasonable response to military aggression. The warning that would soon spread throughout the galaxy was simple: never attack humans. They don't fight wars, they fight crusades, and they will hunt you across the stars until every last member of your species is dead or begging for mercy they're unlikely to grant. 3 years after the destruction of the Corvani invasion fleet, the galaxy had learned to fear a new name: the human expansion. What began as a desperate defense of Earth had evolved into something far more terrifying: a systematic campaign to hunt down and destroy every trace of Corvani civilization across hundreds of worlds. The Galactic Council, which had watched the initial conflict with detached interest, now found themselves facing a crisis that threatened the stability of their entire civilization. The humans had not simply defeated the Corvani Empire. They had absorbed its technology, enslaved its population, and were using captured alien worlds as launching points for further expansion. Ambassador Zilrath of the Centauran Federation stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council, her crystalline form reflecting the harsh lighting of the assembly chamber. Around her, representatives from dozens of species listened with growing unease as she delivered her report on the human situation. "Honored council members," Zilrath began, her voice resonating through the translation systems, "we face an unprecedented threat to galactic civilization. The humans have exceeded every projection of their military capabilities. In the 36 months since the Corvani attack on Earth, human forces have conquered 47 star systems, enslaved or exterminated the populations of 12 different species, and converted entire planetary economies into war production facilities." The holographic display behind her showed the expanding sphere of human-controlled space, a red stain spreading across the galactic map like a disease. Each conquered world was marked with symbols indicating its current status: military base, industrial center, or research facility dedicated to developing new methods of warfare. The humans are not following any recognizable pattern of galactic conquest, the ambassador continued. They are not establishing tributary relationships or seeking resources for their homeworld. Instead, they appear to be conducting a systematic campaign of revenge that targets not just the Corvani Empire, but any species that supported or traded with the Corvani during their expansion period. Elder Moritak of the Theshan Collective raised one of her 4 arms, requesting permission to speak. "Ambassador Zilrath, surely you exaggerate the threat. The humans may have defeated the Corvani through unconventional tactics, but they remain a single species with limited resources. They cannot possibly threaten the combined might of the galactic community." The ambassador's crystalline form shifted colors, indicating deep concern in Centauran body language. "Elder Moritak, I wish they were true. However, Our intelligence indicates that the humans have developed capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of warfare and civilization. They are not limited by the resource constraints that govern other species. The display changed to show captured footage from the fall of Kurthak, the former Corvani homeworld. The images were difficult to watch. Massive human fleets emerging from hyperspace, bombardment from orbit that reduced cities to ash, and ground forces that showed no mercy to military or civilian targets alike. The humans have adopted what they call total warfare, Zilrath explained. They make no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. Every member of an enemy species is considered a legitimate target. More disturbing still, they have demonstrated the ability to convert captured populations into soldiers for their own cause through methods that our xenopsychologists cannot fully comprehend. Representative Vexhai of the Regelian Trade Confederation stood to address the council. What you describe sounds like the actions of species that has suffered catastrophic psychological trauma. Perhaps diplomatic outreach could convince them to cease their expansion and return to peaceful coexistence. The ambassador's response carried a note of bitter humor. Representative Vexhai, several species have attempted diplomatic contact with human forces. The results have been uniformly catastrophic. The humans respond to diplomatic overtures by demanding complete surrender, reparations that amount to economic enslavement, and the right to establish permanent military bases in the territory of any species that seeks peace with them. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans were not seeking to establish their place within the existing galactic order. They were working to replace it entirely. There is more, Zilrath continued. Human technology has advanced at a rate that our scientists consider impossible. They have reverse-engineered Corvani weapons systems, improved upon Centauran shield technology, and developed new methods of faster-than-light travel that exceed the capabilities of any known species. They're not simply using the tools of galactic civilization. They're perfecting them and creating new ones. The display showed technical schematics captured from human research facilities. The designs revealed weapons that combine the best features of multiple galactic technologies while adding innovations that no other species had conceived. Kinetic weapons that could punch through energy shields, energy weapons that could disrupt faster-than-light drives, and defensive systems that seemed to anticipate enemy tactics before they were implemented. "How is this possible?" asked Elder Moratak. The humans were barely a spacefaring species when first contact was made. They should not possess the scientific infrastructure necessary for such rapid advancement. The ambassador's form darkened to a deep purple, indicating profound unease. Our analysis suggests that humans possess a form of collective intelligence that activates under extreme stress. When threatened with extinction, their entire species appears to function as a single problem-solving entity. Every human scientist, engineer, and researcher becomes focused on the same goal: the complete destruction of whatever threatens their survival. The council members exchanged worried glances. They were beginning to understand that humanity represented something entirely outside their experience, a species that became more dangerous the more desperately it was threatened. "What are you recommending?" asked the council chairman, his ancient voice carrying the authority of 1,000 years of galactic diplomacy. Zilrath hesitated before answering. "Chairman, based on the evidence we have gathered, I believe we face two possible futures. Either we unite every military force in the galaxy to destroy humanity before they complete their current expansion, or we accept that the human species will eventually conquer and reshape galactic civilization according to their own vision." The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives argued among themselves about the implications of the ambassador's words. Some called for immediate military action, while others insisted that peaceful resolution was still possible. All of them were struggling to comprehend the scale of the threat humanity represented. As the debate continued, new reports arrived from the edges of human-controlled space. The mining world of Epsilon Eridani had fallen after a siege that lasted only 6 hours. The human fleet had used captured Corvani dreadnoughts modified with weapons that turned the planet's own atmospheric gases into toxic clouds. The defending garrison had surrendered when their air became unbreathable, only to discover that the humans considered surrender a temporary inconvenience rather than an end to hostilities. Dr. Sarah Chun, now holding the title of Director of Galactic Operations, stood aboard the command ship Retribution as it orbited the conquered world. Around her, human officers coordinated the systematic dismantling of alien defensive installations and the relocation of useful technologies back to human research facilities. The transformation of humanity over the past 3 years had been as dramatic as their military expansion. The species that had once debated the ethics of warfare now approached conflict with the cold efficiency of a natural disaster. Every human settlement had become a military base, every civilian a potential soldier, every resource dedicated to the continuation of their campaign against their enemies. Chen received reports from the various front lines where human forces were engaged in combat. The Regellian Trade Confederation had attempted to establish a defense pact with several minor species, but human intelligence had infiltrated their communications. The Alien Alliance would face a coordinated assault from 3 directions, using tactics specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in their collective defensive strategy. Director, reported Captain Williams from the tactical station, we're receiving surrender requests from 4 more Corvani colonies in the Beta Centauri system. They're offering complete capitulation in exchange for civilian protection guarantees. Chun considered the request for a moment before responding. Denied. We've learned that partial measures only lead to future problems. Implement Protocol 7 across all Corvani territories. No survivors, no exceptions. Protocol 7 represented the culmination of human strategic thinking, the complete extermination of enemy populations to prevent any possibility of future resistance. It was a solution that violated every principle of civilized warfare, but humanity had moved beyond such concerns. The war crimes that humans committed on conquered worlds would have horrified the species they had been before the Corvani attack. Mass executions, forced labor, biological warfare, and the systematic destruction of alien cultural sites had become standard operating procedures. The humans justified these actions as necessary for their species' survival, but the truth was simpler. They had discovered they were very good at being monsters, and they were beginning to enjoy it. Admiral Rodriguez, now commanding the largest fleet in human history, reviewed intelligence reports about potential new targets. The Thesian Collective possessed advanced biotechnology that could enhance human soldiers. The Centauran Federation controlled strategic hyperspace routes that would expedite future expansion. The Regellian Trade Confederation had accumulated vast wealth that could fund human war industries for centuries. All of them would fall, eventually. The only question was the order in which humanity would devour them. The transformation wasn't limited to military operations. Human society itself had restructured around the concept of perpetual warfare. Children learned military tactics alongside basic mathematics. Scientists focused exclusively on weapons research and improved methods of controlling conquered populations. Artists created propaganda that celebrated human superiority and demonized alien species. The humans had become exactly what the galaxy feared most, a species that viewed conquest and domination as natural rights rather than unfortunate necessities. They had embraced their role as apex predators and were systematically reshaping the galaxy to reflect their vision of proper order. 5 years after the first Corvani attack on Kepler Station, Ambassador Zilrath met with the last surviving members of the Galactic Council aboard a hidden station in the Vega Nebula. The once proud chamber that had governed hundreds of species now hosted fewer than 20 representatives, the survivors of civilizations that had managed to avoid human attention through isolation and careful neutrality. The situation has deteriorated beyond our worst projections, the ambassador reported, her crystalline form now permanently darkened by stress and exhaustion. Human expansion has accelerated rather than slowed. They now control over 300 star systems and show no signs of moderating their campaign. The few remaining council members listened in silence as she detailed the systematic destruction of galactic civilization. Species that had existed for millions of years had been exterminated in a matter of months. Trade networks that had connected thousands of worlds for millennia had been replaced by human supply lines dedicated entirely to military logistics. The Corvani Empire is completely extinct, Zilrath continued. The humans have sterilized every world they once controlled and converted their populations into biological materials for human research projects. But they haven't stopped there. They're actively hunting down any species that ever had diplomatic relations with the Corvani, claiming that such relationships constitute collaboration with war criminals. Elder Moratak, one of the few survivors from her species, raised a trembling hand. Is there any hope of negotiated settlement? Surely the humans must understand that continued expansion will eventually lead to their own destruction when they exhaust available resources. The ambassador's response carried a finality that chilled every being in the chamber. Elder, our analysis indicates that the humans have transcended traditional resource limitations. They have learned to convert organic matter from any species into forms usable by human biology. They no longer require traditional trade or diplomacy to sustain their civilization. They have become completely self-sufficient through conquest and consumption. The implications were staggering. Humanity had solved the fundamental problem that limited all expanding civilizations. They had learned how to sustain infinite growth through the systematic consumption of other species. They were no longer bound by the economic and resource constraints that forced other civilizations to seek peaceful coexistence. Then, we are facing the end of galactic civilization as we know it, concluded the council chairman. Humanity has become something beyond our ability to understand or control. They are no longer a species seeking their place among the stars. They become a force of nature that consumes everything in its path. As if summoned by their discussion, long-range sensors detected the approach of a human fleet. The hidden station had been discovered, and the last remnants of the old galactic order were about to face the same fate as every other civilization that had opposed humanity's expansion. Ambassador Zilrath transmitted a final message to any civilizations that might still be listening. To all species receiving this transmission, never attack humans. They don't fight wars, they fight extinction campaigns. They will hunt you across the stars, consume your worlds, and ensure that your species exists only as a memory in their historical records. The galaxy belongs to humanity now. Learn to serve them, or prepare to join the rest of us in oblivion. The station's defenses lasted 37 minutes against the human assault. By the time the battle ended, the Galactic Council had ceased to exist, and humanity's dominion over the galaxy was complete and undisputed. The warning was simple, and it had been delivered too late for anyone to heed. Never attack humans, for they will hunt you across the stars until nothing remains but the silence of empty worlds and the memory of civilizations that once dared to threaten the children of Earth.